This here is a Ford Model A or maybe a Ford V8 rear end. I can't tell very much, but I'm really looking for this. So this here is my steer lever for Jackie, the lever steer. And if you look at it close enough, you can very much tell that that's where it came from. If you are unfamiliar with the Wheelhorse story, let me learn you something. This is a 1947 Pond lever steer garden tractor. They were produced in 46 and 47 by Cecil and Elmer Pond, the father and son who founded Wheelhorse. There were 50 of these made in 2 years. And this is where so much history began. There's a lot of people that say that this has a lot of flaws, and I'm not discounting that. There's no other one with a bell housing like this. They did run Ford Model A or V8 transmissions. They ran Ford V8 or Model A rear ends. Our Rideaway Senior must have like a 373 rear end, and this must have a 410 rear end or something like that, because when they're both in third gear and they're both running wide open, this is considerably slower. And that's okay. It was built to be a worker back then. It was built to replace a horse. Anything you could pull with a horse, you could pull with a Pond lever steer. And there's a lot of repairs that have been done to this along the way that don't make any sense to me. This is a water pipe or a black pipe, I don't know. It's been plug welded. This is a reducer bell. And this is a steering rod. And I don't think any of that was factory. But it hasn't given me any issues, so I'm going to leave it the way it is right now. That lever, I figured out, came from those same Ford rear ends that the axles came from. Apparently there was a guy named Friday Freddy, and Friday Freddy would scour the junkyards around South Bend and bring the Pond's Ford junkyard parts to build their brand new tractors. And he stopped by every Friday. And so in the Wheelhorse story by Michael Martino, it talks about how these transmissions and rear ends were used. And this should have had a Briggs ZZP, and I have a Briggs ZZ. The difference is that the ZZ is not tapped for a bell housing, and the ZZP is. So someday I'd like to maybe get that Briggs going. But for now, this Wisconsin AEN is the same engine that was on the Rideaway Seniors later on. So it's close enough. It's period correct, if you ask me. Anyway, this lever was not documented in the Wheelhorse story. Nobody really pointed that out ever. I've seen some with just a flat bar. But when I found that rear end at an auction, I think I paid $10 or maybe $15, and ended up coming with a front axle as well that I didn't know was part of the deal. But I only wanted it for that lever, knowing that if I ever had to rebuild this, that lever is what I needed. So now it's time to do a little reverse engineering and figure out how to build this lever. Like many parts of this tractor, this has been broken and repaired and broken numerous times. And this was one major crack that I ground with my death wheel, and I wire wheeled it and I started welding, but now I'm getting blowouts. And that wasn't there before, so this is falling apart as I repair it. This sleeved piece of steel, I believe, comes up to here. It is not up here, but this has become very thin over the years, and this is much thicker. You can kind of see through the hole where some of the items were screwed into this. You can see that there's still some thickness left, and that's good. Another kind of cool part of this mystery of what is correct from 1947 is this right here. It looks like a casted piece, and I think I'm going to try to graft it onto this new lever, because that's, in my eyes, that's original. It's not perfect at all. It's not round. It's very crude, and that's kind of telling a story. So I want to keep this. This down here, I can recreate this. That's just a 3/4 bar. It's been welded through. I think that's been repaired many times. And so I can fix this. I can do something different. But what I'm going to do is just kind of line this up width-wise and see if I can make any sense of it. It's kind of challenging because this is pretty bent and beat. But if I do this, kind of follow it up. That kind of tells me that's my meat and potatoes. That's what I'm looking for. And also, right about here, this becomes a little bent. So if I cut this, I'll have a nice straight rod. You can see that by that seam being straight. So I'm going to cut that and maybe see what it takes to mark my center pivot. Cut a piece of 3/4 inch rod and just kind of keep working. So one of my first issues right off the bat is this broken stud. It was all rounded off. I ended up actually just grinding it out. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to weld a nut to what's left, so I don't have to try to cut it out from the inside. You are sitting on the welder, so we're gonna see if this works. I'm gonna crank the heat up a notch. Keep the wire speed where it's at. So I can just pour some heat into all this, but not really build up much wire. Come on now. Maybe too much heat. It'd be really cool to see if I could see the glowing stud, but I can't. This might not work the first time. I might need to sacrifice more nuts. Yep. Last effort here. I just had to claim that I was about to give up. That's all. There we go. So now we have a lever that's ready to be duplicated. And that is good. I like that a lot. I'm going to go ahead and mark, just for the sake of it, that right here is my center line for my pivot. And as much as I know that in the late 40s, there were accurate ways to measure, and there were good pieces of equipment, good machinery, I'm going to try to do as much as I can here to kind of eyeball things and replicate what would have been done back then. I'm not going to use the CNC mill. I'm going to use a drill press. Maybe just for my own sake and well-being. Now this here, I am a little bit nervous about, a little bit excited to use. It's just a piece of metal, but it means something to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first wire wheel it and see if I can get my weld bead exposed, so I can see if I can cut that. Man, I can see it. I almost started wondering if at some point they just had a way to notch that and they just bent it over. And I might find out if that's the truth. I'm going to cut that right there. I'm going to cut it on the weld and see. But I just can't tell if that's welded and ground or if it's just a bad cast. One way to find out. There. That's really hard to tell what they had going on there. I don't know, but at least that'll remind me where it came from. We'll line her up like that and give it a good weld. Next, I have a new death wheel, and I'm going to cut down this seam so I have a good clean seam all the way to weld that back up. I want this to be a solid tube instead of just a crimped tube. Now I can clamp that, weld it shut, and start over. Just a little progress update on my rebuilt lever. I have not welded my new pin in yet, but I did drill through, you can see there, and drill through from the back side. So I'll be able to put a greaser in here, a 45, and then once it's in here, it'll be pushing grease through the bushing in the frame. And I did a 45, so I'll be able to access it without interfering with the tire. Now it's all assembled. I drilled and tapped this greaser here, and aha! I got grease coming out right there. So I'm gonna wipe up all my excess and get it all over my fingers anyway. I got grease on both sides of the frame. I got a lever steer. That's still pretty sticky. So I'm going to let it keep curing. And I would say that this tractor is ready for a plow day.